Bill, good morning. How are you?
Doing well, guys. How are you?
Doing okay. Let's start there. The latest on, or you back up before we start to get to names. Your reaction to, you have covered LSU's basketball program since the first day of Will Wade. You had a great relationship, have a great relationship with Wade and the program under his direction. What was your reaction to a nearly a week ago, a little over a week ago, to Wade being ousted?
Yeah, it was kind of surprising, right? I mean, it seemed like things were trending towards, even an extension, coming down the line for him. And then LSU receives a notice of allegations and decides to kind of turn heel and make the move away from Wade. And I mean, I think you look back on his tenure and I mean, it was exciting. There were times that, this program looked like it was going to be a national championship, contender. And, year in, year out, I feel like they had the talent of, for the most part, to be that type of program. The pieces didn't always necessarily fit together as well as, even Wade probably would have liked. Obviously, they had the great run to an SEC title, and they've had NCAA tournament appearances, but they just never got over that hump for whatever reason. And, I think it was trending towards, maybe getting over that hump at some point down the line. And so it's just going to be honestly, it was a fun, interesting time to cover LSU basketball. Recruiting obviously went well. The team played well for the most part, just about every night. And but you do wonder just what could have been if he would have had a little bit more time or things would have worked out on that front.
So now the job is open and has been for over a week. In that time period, they are bounced out of the NCAA tournament and start to look towards next season. What do you anticipate the shakeout to be now that Wade is out? We've seen a couple of decommitments as far as recruiting goes. What do you imagine this roster looks like in the next couple of months?
Yeah, that's a huge question. And the good thing for LSU as far as maybe trying to retain some of these players on the team is that they do have time. It's not like football season where you get done with the season and then you're in final exams and guys are maybe looking to jump ship and change programs and get a fresh start and do all of those things in a very tight window. It is it's late March now. And so they do have that time where they can make a hire. They could build relationships once they make that hire and then see if they can keep some of these guys around. The big question, probably the biggest question I would have is can they keep Adam Miller? He was going to be a huge piece for this team before he got hurt. He's already used his transfer. I would think there could be a potential that he could get a waiver, but you never know. If we can talk coaches in a minute, I guess, but if they got Matt McMahon, he did a great job with John Moran. Developing him, and so that could be a selling point, for example, on that front. And then you look at guys like Tari Eason. I would assume he's going to go to the NBA draft, and there's not many guys that could stop that from happening. They have some pieces to fill as well, just with Darius Days, Xavier Pinson departing. Those guys, but you have a nice young core that you've got to really recruit hard to stay. And who knows what happens? Guys like Alex Fudge, who sometimes it was kind of mystifying, when we'd see him, when we wouldn't. Does Sharif O'Neal stick around? But I think you're going to see most likely a good bit of turnover, and that's just kind of college basketball these days anyway. With the roster turnover, and even when things were going well under Wade, we saw a lot of roster turnover for the most part year in, year out. So it's going to be a lot of recruiting to keep a lot of these guys around. But I would expect there to be a good bit of roster turnover just because that's the nature of how these things go.
We've heard a couple of names start to surface. There's rumors and, smoke around Scott Drew. But there was a confirmed report by Jeff Goodman and then confirmed by you that Matt McMahon from Murray State has been in conversation with Woodward, or at least contact has been made. What do you know about the coaching search, and where do you feel it goes next?
Yeah, I think this is overall a quintessential Scott Woodward search. Late last week, I heard that they reached out to Chris Beard. Didn't hear of any sort of things moving in any sort of direction as far as discussions. I think Chris Beard's very happy from what I've heard at Texas. I heard there was contact made with Tony Bennett's camp, trying to get him to sit down and talk, and I would say those things are not necessarily dead in the water right now. I'm not saying he's going to be the next coach by any means, but I do think that Scott is probably going to take another swing at Tony Bennett, just because, ties to Louisiana, really good defensive-minded coach. He's won a national championship. His wife went to LSU. There's family in the area. There's a lot of things that could certainly draw him to LSU, and that's kind of Scott Woodward's MO is coaches with national championships or very, very, very high levels of winning throughout his past coaching searches. And then you've got Scott Drew, and LSU has Kim Mulkey now, and they've got a relationship, and that would be a terrific hire if they can get him out of Baylor. He's won a national championship, and that's another name that I think he would continue to push for. I would say. I just think with Scott Woodward's approach, you see him kind of have multiple lines in the water. When you look back to when LSU was going after Lincoln Riley, and from everything I heard, they were going to talk with him, and USC won out, and he took one more run at Jimbo Fisher and then ended up with Brian Kelly, and that's not a consolation situation. It's just kind of how I heard, it happened. And I think you look at the Matt McMahon thing developing now with Murray State's coach, and he would be a very good hire. He's won a ton of basketball games. He's developed really high NBA draft picks like John Morant, and we saw the work that he's done, and you see the consistency that he's done, that he's had at the mid-major level, and now maybe he's next up to get that shot to move up to a bigger program in a high major opportunity. South Carolina's been courting him, and the fact that hasn't materialized quickly like some would expect, with the ties that he kind of has to some of the people and the program over there at South Carolina, tells me that LSU is in some serious talks with Matt McMahon, and this is something to certainly watch.
Is there any idea, do you get any idea of if Scott Woodward and the executives from LSU having any inkling of what they're selling, what they're offering? Do they know what could be coming down the pipe from the NCAA as far as a violation or a penalty assessment?
I would think they have a fairly good idea. What that is, I'm not too sure of. I do think there is a little bit of confidence that maybe it's not going to be as bad as some people would think, just because of all the years of coverage over the Will Wade stuff and all that, which we don't need to get into. But just because of how well covered that was, you would think that there's going to be a massive, massive sanction coming. And from my conversations with people, it just doesn't seem like that's going to happen, especially since the NCAA isn't too keen on punishing current players on the roster for what happened in the past. And so that's something to kind of, hold on to, I think, especially if you're an LSU fan. They did move on from Will Wade. They moved on from Bill Armstrong, and they did it pretty quickly after the notice of allegations, which, right or wrong decision as far as moving on from Wade, that was something that I would imagine they had some discussions with the NCAA about as far as how it could help them in the process with their case. And so, overall, I would think you see it as a contract that's built with a ton of protection for whoever the coach is. If there are massive sanctions, I would imagine a buyout would drop significantly, or a clause that makes the salary go up, or an extension that kicks in right away, because whoever takes this job isn't going to know any of the sanctions until, well into their first year on campus. So there's got to be a lot of protection for the coach. And, Scott Woodward does have that ability to spend some money. And I expect this deal for whoever gets it to reflect that.
What did you make of Todd Golden agreeing to terms with Florida?
Yeah, I thought it was a solid hire. I think, coming all the way from San Francisco, not only just across the country, but at that level, I would have thought maybe he would have taken a jump to a high-ish mid-major before going to Florida. But, he's got the ties in the SEC from Auburn. He's an up-and-coming, well-respected head coach. And sometimes, those guys need a shot, and if they interview well and impress well, they can earn that opportunity. And, I think Matt McMahon is a good example of a guy who's ready to lead a bigger program. Todd Golden will certainly find out if he was ready for the bigger stage at Florida. Good thing for him is he's not following Billy Donovan like Mike White did. So he's got that going for him. But, I think his team's played really well and he, deserved the opportunity. I just was a little surprised he got that opportunity before maybe making a stop somewhere else, maybe a little bit smaller.